Welcome. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful to see you all. Welcome to Thank You Life's Fireside Chat with our co-founder, Dr. Dan Engle, otherwise known by many as Dr. Dan. So excited to introduce him in a minute and get started. I'm Laura Lacrane. I'm the board chair of Thank You Life. And for those who don't know about us, our mission is to ensure that all people, regardless of their ability to pay, have access to psychedelic healing therapies. And we're a young organization and about our third year, and super excited by all the work we've done so far and the people we've helped. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of this little bar here so I can see you all. I think it's wonderful to have it on gallery view as we start so we can see who's here. I like to, if it's okay, take a moment before I introduce Dr. Dan to kind of ground together and maybe begin to I don't know if this language matches your view, but sort of resonate in the frequency of gratitude, one of our core values. So I'm going to see if I can help with that by inviting you all to close your eyes for a moment, or if it's more comfortable to just have a soft gaze. Just take a moment to arrive here, now, in this moment. This place, this Zoom room, this wonderful gathering of hearts and minds. Best way I know to begin to become more present is following my breath. So maybe just take a nice big inhale through the nose, maybe a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Maybe another one. Just allowing yourself to let go of the day, some of the worries and cares or activities that might have occupied you today, just letting them go on the breath, arriving here and now. And as you take those breaths, maybe just take a moment to give thanks for breath, for air, for this ability to be alive and the breath that keeps us alive. And then just take a moment to feel your seat, feel your place on your chair or couch or floor, and feel that groundedness with the earth, being held so effortlessly by gravity, close to the earth. Coming into this body, giving thanks for this body and for this earth that is holding this body. It takes care of this body. Now just taking a moment to be grateful. Just in your own way, maybe you'll repeat it silently to yourself. I am grateful for. Just spend a moment thinking about the things that you're grateful for. It's so easy just to think for a moment of this magnificent earth that provides so much to our beloved relationships, to where we get to live, maybe the work that we get to do. So much to be grateful for. Now just bringing your attention to this moment and to this gathering where we are celebrating the healing potential of psychedelic medicines and, yeah, taking some of our life energy to ensure all people have access to these modalities so that all people have the opportunity to feel grateful for their lives, to ease some of the suffering in their own lives and those around them, so that we can all experience that feeling of thank you, life. So coming back to the group, opening your eyes, giving thanks to this group that's gathered, yeah, in this moment, seeing who's here. Yeah, thank you. So I'm given the honored privilege of introducing our co-founder, Dr. Dan. I can see that our other co-founder, Kevin Canella, and our executive director is here. Thanks for being here, Kevin. So just to say a couple of things about Dr. Dan. Wow, I mean, I could go on and on about his bio, and I'm not going to. I'm let his stories speak for themselves. But just to say that he is a psychiatrist with a clinical practice that combines regenerative medicine, psychedelic research, integrative spirituality, and peak performance. That's including healing neurocognitive ability. So after receiving his medical training, way back when, in psychiatry, and working in private practice as a psychiatrist, Dr. Dan became disillusioned by what psychiatry had to offer, and was focusing his practice on getting people off conventional medicines and medications, and finding alternative treatments for them. And about 15 years ago, he was invited to his first ayahuasca ceremony down in the Amazon. And there he had a life-changing spiritual awakening and ended up staying in the jungle for a year, worked with that medicine, ayahuasca, for a whole year. And basically, it changed the trajectory of his life and his offering to the world and his orientation with healing mental health issues in our people. And so, oh boy, that led him to dive deeply into many modalities. He's worked with many healers around the world with different modalities, including Iboga in Gabon, which is our focus of today. Other medicines. He's worked also supporting the establishment of healing centers around the world, mostly in the States and some abroad. And he's written some books about concussion repair and about the MDMA therapies. And I'll say one of his most profound offerings of many that is relevant today is co-founding Thank You Life, a mission to ensure everyone has access to these modalities. So I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful for what you've created, Dr. Dan. Thank you, Life, and really grateful for giving your time today to share whatever it is you want to share about your journey, and in particular on Iboga in this moment in history.
Mm.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank you.
Dr. Dan.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, pleasure to be with everybody today. I see a lot of new faces and familiar faces, and it always warms my heart to be able to sit around the fire and share the stories of the medicine work. Because as Laura mentioned, it's certainly revolutionized my life. And as also Laura mentioned, our orientation to Thank You Life is to try and do our small part that's integral in retelling the story of the importance of accessibility, not only the profound healing impacts of all these medicines, but why finances should not be the primary barrier to entry. And for most, it is right now. So thankfully, this is a grassroots movement that has reignited the psychedelic renaissance. And it's a lot to ask to try and cover Iboga and Ibogaine in only about another hour or so time that we have slotted. So I'm going to move pretty efficiently through a lot of material. And also, we're going to expand time and make sure that the information that I share is easy to receive, digest, utilize. And I ask each of you to think about it and to ask the questions that you might have already top of mind or top of heart, or that you might get inspired to ask through any of the question or any of the content and offering that I share. I've heard it said that the only wrong question is the question not asked. So feel free to ask all of your questions, because in my experience too, that's where it gets usable and it becomes more of a dialogue versus me just like like the old Charlie Brown cartoon when the teacher's just up there jabbering at the front of the room. That's the last thing I want to be doing here. So my entry into medicine work, as Laura said, was about 20 years ago. And it revolutionized my life. I closed my clinic, moved down to the jungle, and just started apprenticing and worked with Aya only for about 10 years until my sister died from suicide and addiction and PTSD and depression, and had done everything that the standard of care said to do, including talk therapy and medication management and AA groups and a whole lot of other things that marginally worked intermittently, but ultimately failed her and are failing a lot of people. So when she passed, it was kind of like my wake-up call that I couldn't do this kind of work underground anymore. And not only was I going to do my best to champion this work in the world, I also wanted to understand the other relevant medicines in the toolkit. So that led me to explore just about all the psychedelics that are researched today. And I do my best to try and go to the source, especially if it's a natural medicine. So when it came to addiction recovery, because that's what Trudy suffered with the most, Iboga is far along the path of what we've ever seen in psychiatry for a curative treatment for addiction recovery. Yes, ayahuasca and some of the other medicines are good for addiction as well, but Iboga is head and tails above all the others. So I had my first cure and was just really inspired by the medicine. It's a gorgeous medicine. It's the most complete medicine. It's the most complex medicine that we know of today. So the difference between Iboga and Ibogaine, oftentimes people use them interchangeably and they're not the same. Ibogaine is the primary alkaloid in Iboga. Iboga has about 12 alkaloids primarily that we know of. There are probably others. And when you take out the primary alkaloid in any medicine and you synthesize that and you just give that, then you lose the entourage effect of all the other alkaloids that tend to buffer or balance or support or ignite or help the complementary array of the full healing effect that's possible. And there is benefit to using Ibogaine just by itself, because first and foremost, if you just think about supply and demand, there's not enough Iboga to go around the world to treat the global crisis of addiction right now. And when the majority of Iboga was threatened in supply because it was harvested very quickly without thought to replanting, this was in the 90s and 2000s, we had to get creative and look at other medicines that Ibogaine could be extracted from. And then ultimately that led to synthetic and semi-synthetic production of Ibogaine. So the benefit is now we're able to much more robustly ensure supply, and you can dose it more directly. Ibogaine is more specific in its dose range. It lasts only about half as long as Iboga does. And it's also very good for addiction recovery. Doesn't have quite the psychospiritual nature because you don't have the whole plant, and nature has evolved over millions of years for a reason. I was the medical director of an Ibogaine center in Mexico for about 10 years ago. And it was incredible to see consistently people come in who were daily opioid users or opiate addicts, whether it was heroin, pain medications, or a variety of others, could have been daily users for upwards of 10 years or more and go through one treatment with Ibogaine and be done. And there's nothing on the planet that's quite like that. And not only was the addiction cured, there was no craving and no withdrawal. And there's absolutely nothing on the planet that will do it to that same degree. Other medicines that might be good for addiction don't have that same curative effect at the opiate receptors. So we're also having this conversation around Ibogaine right now because Texas, where I'm from and where I see some of the participants are also from, Texas just passed a bill allocating $50 million for Ibogaine research and production. And this is the largest publicly funded allocation to psychedelic medicine research ever in the history of any government. So it's quite notable. And it's notable that a huge grassroots movement was significantly supportive for that movement. Ibogaine and Iboga are very good for healing psychology and neurology. So when I wrote the concussion repair manual, what was that now, like maybe 10 years ago, there was a chapter on psychedelic therapy that I wanted to include, but I decided at the last minute to not include that because I didn't want the skeptics to deny everything else that I'd put in there about neurocognitive recovery after traumatic brain injury. And many people are still skeptical about psychedelic therapy. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's unwarranted, because a lot of these tools have their right place and not everybody is a candidate for Ibogaine therapy, whether it's readiness or some contraindication or a variety of other factors that may just be recognized to appreciate the fact that there's an easy entry in. If somebody has a life-threatening addiction, yes, go straight to Ibogaine. If somebody's curious about psychedelic therapy, I say, yeah, you might not want to start with Ibogaine, because I put Ibogaine and Iboga in the level 3 medicines. So if I look at the hierarchy of medicines, like the easy entry into this kind of work, level 1 medicines, MDMA, ketamine, cannabis, psilocybin, low dose LSD, those 5. Level 2 medicines, ayahuasca, San Pedro, peyote. And level 3 medicines, Iboga and 5-MeO-DMT, that either can be synthesized or from the Sonoran Desert toad. So I put Iboga in a level 3 medicine because it does have significant risk, especially if somebody has a heart condition. That's the primary risk. With Iboga itself, there's some cardioprotective effects of the other alkaloids. Ibogaine is a little harsher on the heart and the cardiovascular system. Still very uncommon, but for anybody going into Ibogaine or Iboga therapy, you have to get pre-screened EKG and heart monitors just to make sure that that's not a risk. So if you take out the contraindications on the physical side, then there's a psychological readiness. And if somebody's never had an altered state experience, going straight to Ibogaine might be a tall order. So there may be ways that are more comforting and supportive to ease a person into altered states. So all that to say, I think Iboga is probably the most complete medicine that I've had the privilege to work with. As Laura mentioned, I did go to Gabon about 2.5 years ago now and went through the Iboga initiation with the Bwiti people, where Iboga comes from in West Africa. And that's an otherworldly experience. And it offered me the opportunity to see the size and the scope of its power and its potential to revolutionize a person's life. And so I've had the opportunity to facilitate with Iboga out of the country with a variety of different teams. And it's notable to see what the Stanford research last year also showed with Ibogaine. And that research was from Nolan Williams. And this was one treatment with Ibogaine that showed depression, anxiety, and PTSD all but were eradicated in the 30 veterans that went through treatment, which is pretty notable. And that was followed up, I think, 6 months later. And given the fact that that was only a year ago, there's going to be some longer term data to continue to track. And it's also consistent with what we saw down at Crossroads in Mexico 10 years ago at the clinic that I was running. We would see about an 80% cure rate for addiction when people had aftercare support. And that was a variety of different addictions with 1 week of treatment, versus about a 20 to 25% success rate if people didn't have aftercare or addiction recovery support on the backside. So then we see also the importance of integration. When a person goes through a sizable experience like that, how do you land it? And how does it become relevant for life? So with addiction, it looks really clear. At least the first entry into that is aftercare support and sober living, and having a coach and a guide to be able to continue to navigate unwinding a lot of the ties and identities that were related to addiction in the first place. But that's also similar to somebody going through depression, PTSD, and anxiety. Because depression, anxiety, and PTSD in psychiatry terms tends to mean a life sentence. And that was the same for me when I had a significant series of concussions, just being a knucklehead in a variety of different sports, the last of which I had really bad post-concussive syndrome. And I didn't know why I was having narcolepsy and depression, but the treatment at the time was take a pharmaceutical for life, and we hope to manage the symptoms. There was very little discussion about a curative opportunity for any of those, whether it's on the neurology side with the concussion or the psychology side with the depression. So that got me into the laboratory, and that has really highlighted for me the power of the psychedelic therapy movement, because it's very good for both neurology and psychology. So with Ibogaine, we just talked about the Stanford research. Depression, PTSD, and anxiety all but went away after 1 treatment with Ibogaine. That's on kind of what I might call the software side of things. On the hardware side of things, you can also see with Ibogaine and Iboga that they stimulate a variety of different growth factors, and they enhance a variety of different executive functions. So growth factors mean grows new neurons. And they did a predictive analysis of the brain. And after 1 treatment with Ibogaine, it became 1.37 years younger. And they could see that because there was cortical thickening, which means like the areas of the brain that were a little thin and atrophied started to plump up again, and there was greater blood flow. So this isn't just people saying they're feeling better. This is actually things that we're able to see neurologically and neuroanatomically on brain scans. So you have that on the psychology side, right? We talked about the software. And then on the hardware, you can see the changes, but then also how does the brain perform? Everybody going through these treatments, or when they did a summation of the data, there was increased in executive function of cognitive performance and cognitive inhibition, which means I'm able to perform better, think faster, with more agility, with more flexibility, and I'm also able to inhibit that which I don't want to do. When I kind of have like a wiser part of my mind saying, actually, that wouldn't be a good choice. Or if you're doing like ADHD testing and you have a person punch a button when they, are flashed a trigger, and they're only supposed to punch a button when they flash a particular trigger, but when they flash another trigger, you're not supposed to push the button. So you get better at being able to perform in this kind of capacity and also inhibit the thing that is like the not healthy stimulus, so to speak. So that becomes highly relevant for something like addiction recovery, is to have that cognitive inhibition. So you've got software, you've got hardware that you can see, and you have hardware performance that you can measure and that a person feels. So I might not necessarily feel that I have greater blood flow or greater cortical thickening, but I can tell if I'm thinking clear, thinking faster, and able to have more agency of my choice. So I wasn't going to share this, but when I went through the initiation in Gabon, and I shared my experience, because when you go through, they call working with Iboga in Africa. They call it eating the wood because it's a root bark and it's a bit like sawdust, which is not easy to get down, especially when you're taking a spoonful after spoonful after spoonful. And what it does, it takes you into this lucid dream time. It's called an oneirogen. Iboga and Ibogaine are in the classification of oneirogens. They're not classical psychedelics. And an oneirogen, well, we might think of like psychedelics as an umbrella term, and then there's different, like MDMA is an empathogen. It builds empathy. An oneirogen is a medicine that is a dream-inducing medicine. And that's what Iboga is. And so when you take a lot of Iboga and you're in the initiation, it takes you across to the veil, so to speak. And it opened up into this 4-day dream cycle. And when I finally landed and came back and I was sharing with the Nima, or the guy who was holding my initiation, my experience, he offered me the name Kengele. And Kengele in Bwiti means clarity. And for me, that's what these medicines are. And that's what another of my teachers, Don Howard Lawler, in the Cactus or San Pedro tradition, he would call these medicines clarigens. He doesn't refer to them as psychedelics. And most of the indigenous medicine elders don't even call these medicines medicines. In many traditions, they call them tools, because a medicine connotes that something's going to get cured and that we don't have agency or participation. But in their cosmology, we have to do our 50%. And so it's up to us to engage the process and use the tool in a good way. And just like any tool, if you don't use it in a good way, it can be harmful. And the psychedelics are that way too. That's why I think there's a slow, thoughtful rollout through decriminalization, legalization medically, and ultimately legalization recreationally. And we need to tell a different story, ultimately for our culture at large to be able to appreciate that these medicines are not like the fried egg commercial during the Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan years of that propaganda and the DARE movement that said, if you use these medicines or drugs, that you're going to be crazy and you're going to end up destitute and homeless and your brain's going to be a fried egg. So we're in the midst of retelling that whole story. And thankfully, the grassroots movement is showing the benefit. And that's, I think, what a huge portion of this Texas legislation movement was. The data is so good. The data is 10x beyond the current standard of care in psychiatry. And we're talking about not just improving symptoms, we're talking about curing symptoms. Nothing in psychiatry, when I was in psychiatry training, talked about curing anything. It was all about symptom management. Well, now we have tools that can actually cure the underlying causes, because what we're doing is we're healing the bridge between science and spirit. We're healing our relationship between our own physicality, our own human experience, and our own relationship with the divine, whatever that is for you. And the reason I say that is because even the clinical studies done without an orientation to the spiritual impact, like the mid-90s, the first study done in 25 years was Rick Strassman's study with DMT. And you can go look up the documentary DMT, the spirit molecule. And he specifically proposed studying DMT to look at the physiological effects. Because if he was going in there to try and look at the spiritual effects, the study wouldn't have been approved. So yes, they had all this physiologic data, but then the people were able to tell their story on top of that. So the study was published and people started sharing their incredible spiritual experiences. And that's the last thing I'll say before we take a little TV time out and turn the mic back over to Ronnie, is that it's a travesty for me. And I'm happy to speak to anybody directly about this. It's a travesty that this pharmaceutical industry would try to take out the psychedelic experience or the spiritual experience from these medicines. Because when you look at the data is incontrovertible, that the experience of healing is proportional to the spiritual process that's undertaken. So when a person's able to return to some degree of belief in something larger than themselves, have faith in life, and recognize that they're a part of this whole master plan of beauty and grace that might be that thank you life moment, we see that the healing is significantly higher than if somebody goes in just thinking they're going to get cured or their, depression's going to get magically solved. So with that, Ronnie, I'll turn it over to you and make sure that you keep us on track.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dan. So there's a lot here, right? I mean, Iboga, Ibogaine, there's a lot here. So we were curious, the Thank You Life team, to ask a question to all of you. So hopefully you see it on your screen. We want to know, which aspect of Ibogaine or Iboga are you most curious about? Even if, all of those are true and you want to learn about all of those, try to just pick one. And let's just see, this could help to inform the rest of the conversation. And Dr. Dan, I couldn't agree more. We have our good friend Florian Birkmeyer, who's into aromatherapy and bridging that into psychedelics. And he describes these medicines as ecodelics because they help us see our place in the larger ecosystem. And to many of us, that is the divine, the interconnectedness of all beings, of all different parts of the ecosystem, and being able to kind of get out of our myopic experience for just a couple hours can be life-changing, especially if there's so much pain, addiction, and kind of just the heaviness of our daily life. So
Amen. Yeah, the Surgeon General even said under the Obama administration, I forget his name now, but he wrote a book on isolation. We saw that in COVID, that the number one epidemic in America is isolation,
right,
disconnection. So we have these medicines that help us connect to the ecosystem, experience a sense of belonging. Phenomenal. Everything is going to get better because that's how we're wired.
Yeah, going to be happening at a more perfect time. So it looks like we've had 78% of the people, to be precise, have answered. So if you haven't answered the question, if you could just take a moment, we'll give it another 10 or 15 seconds just to get everybody involved if possible. Love it. Okay, thank you all so much. Let's share this. Okay, Dr. Dan, can you see the results?
Yeah.
Amazing. Feel free to just riff on these, and
yeah,
I'm going to disappear back into the shadows.
I'm totally digging this poll scenario. So I'll start in the first place position, and then we'll go through those. And Ronnie, how much time do I have on this riff?
Go for another 10 or 15, whatever feels in flow.
Okay, super. So let's talk about the spiritual or visionary qualities. So Iboga, like many other medicines, I'm going to move this poll out of the way so I can see better. Okay, great. Iboga, like many of the other medicines, the natural medicines, they have a vertical quality. And what I mean by that is they go down to our source, our Mother Earth, and they go up to spirit. Whereas something like MDMA tends to be more horizontal. It goes into the relational field, like what we can see in the 3D reality, right? If you look across the landscape, the horizon, we're looking at just the skin of our Mother Earth. And these medicines that are natural, hence they have an organic kind of blueprint: psilocybin, peyote, San Pedro, Iboga, ayahuasca, as mentioned, the Sonoran Desert Toad, Salvia divinorum. There's a long list of Kana. There's a long list of beautiful medicines in that kind of psychedelic pantheon. Some of those are empathogens more than psychedelics, but let's just take them globally. Because there's an organic blueprint, they tend to Ronnie's point, be ecodelics because they help us return to our place in the natural order. So they help us generate an experience of right relationship. And not just the experience in the moment, but if we're able to integrate that experience moving forward, then it typically improves our experience in referencing our right place in the ecosystem, and the importance of what many of our teachers would say, the 7 generations behind and the 7 generations to come. So not only am I orienting my place at the sacred seat of the table with all of our brothers and sisters as our family of humanity, right? Because we are all from one species, regardless of background, cultural heritage, socioeconomic status. This is one family of humanity, and we've oftentimes forgotten that. Regardless of our spiritual dogmas, or our personal limited beliefs. So not only does it help us rewire through this empathic connection, because now we can see each other as brothers and sisters, we can start to see the life force within one another. We're able to orient a place to a greater compassionate experience, to be able to put ourselves in another's position. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody's just doing the best they can given the tools they have. So it helps with this spiritual kind of like reunification, not just with our family of humanity, but also all life. Because, like it or not, all life on this planet shares the same home. And there's nothing, when we throw something away, it doesn't just go away. It might magically just go out of our line of sight, but it goes somewhere. So our choices matter. Our consumption matters. What we do with our life force energy matters. There's only ever in the existence of life itself, there's only ever been one you. And there will only ever be one you. Right? Just like if you have triplets born into a family at the same time, you're going to have three very different personas, even though same mom, same dad, same environmental upbringing. You have three very different people. We're all infinitely unique. Just like if you go outside and you stare at the stars, they're all unique. Grains of sand, all unique. Leaves on a tree, all unique. Right? So we have this uniqueness that is clarified in the medicine experience. And the reason I say that, not for everybody, but for the vast majority of people, if you look at the data is consistent that there's some kind of what we might call spiritual process emerging, which is our appreciation of our family of humanity and our appreciation for life itself. And that's kind of like the inception of our organization, is we want to support everybody coming back into that thank you life moment. And because when we come back into a place of gratitude, we naturally want to give back. So you can say that about Iboga, ayahuasca, San Pedro, etc. So now what is specific about Iboga in that regard? Iboga is a fascinating medicine. I tend to think that it's more like a clarigen than any of the other medicines that I've ever come across. And it's probably akin to how it works neurologically. Because you would have to have a medicine, anything that's going to be able to go in and scrub the receptors clean so that somebody with a 10-year history of opiate dependence comes out with no craving and no withdrawal. That means the receptors are clean. In one treatment, it's kind of like mind-boggling. Iboga works on 50 different receptor profiles and ion channels and transport mechanisms. And those are just the ones that we know. It's probably much more complex than that. And oh, by the way, we only know 3% of the biodiversity in the entire Amazon rainforest or the Congo rainforest. So like what other medicines are there that we're not even aware of? And 100 to 150 species go extinct every day. So we're not just talking about like, oh, our choices don't matter. They do matter. And waking up to an appreciation of how we're all interconnected is highly relevant to our survival. And not just kind of like eking by a menial existence, like really stepping into our birthright, which is an experience of beauty and grace and the miracle of life that's always waiting to be tuned into. Grace is always available. We just oftentimes need to get our little receptors scrubbed so we can come back and appreciate it. And that's what these medicines, particularly Iboga, helps do. When you hear veteran stories of getting blown up in war and are just shattered by neurologic damage, but also the PTSD or survivor guilt or a host of other things, to be able to go through one treatment and slough that off, it's amazing. It's incredible. And those are the stories that get people's attention. And so that's why this movement is happening. So the spiritual kind of aspects, I don't think can be denied. I think some people will try to deny that. But when I ask those people who are trying to deny the spiritual impulse and experience in this kind of work, usually they have not had their own experience. So it's like they're trying to teach a person how to have sex and they've never had sex. It's a highly experiential process. And it would be my hope that all people in particularly psychiatry, but medicine in general, have some type of curated entry into altered state experiences. When I mean curated, like a well-held set and setting into an experience to appreciate what we're actually talking about. Because so many people making big decisions in this movement have not had significant experience themselves. So that's a little bit of the spiritual aspect. That was about a 10-minute. We talked a little bit about the addiction recovery aspect. Yeah, there's probably more to say there, but I'll hold that for now. And the physiologic benefits and potential risks. So that's a good one. The physiological benefits. So we talked about the neurologic. And so my background's in neurology and psychiatry. Neurology is hardware, psychology software. So anytime you want to upgrade your computer, it's helpful to do both. If you do one or the other, you're going to get marginal success. If you upgrade both, you get significant success. And so we look at both of those. So we talked a little bit about the neurologic benefits. So the thing that's interesting for me is that we're just now scratching the surface of the neurologic implications for Iboga and Ibogaine. Iboga is the only plant on the planet that's known to reverse Parkinson's symptoms. Not just like slow them down, not just like put them into a place of like no more progression or halt them, but actually reverse Parkinson's symptoms. And it might be because we're seeing this neurologic benefit, cortical thickening, increased blood flow, et cetera. I'll give you one anecdote, which is interesting. So I was part of a Iboga facilitation team last year. And there was a chemical engineer, PhD, that came in for treatment. And he was coming in for the spiritual treatment, very deep in his spiritual practice of Sufism. And he had heard the benefits and wanted to see how it could accelerate his practice. It was already quite beautiful. And he also had an occupational exposure to benzene as a chemical engineer 20 years ago. And benzene's a pretty hazardous chemical that if you're exposed at significant amounts, it has neurologic damage. And it affects his cerebellum, which is where you hold your balance. You kind of hold your position, proprioception in space. And he walks like he prior to treatment, always walked like he just got off a merry-go-round. It was like, wobbly, couldn't really find his center or a sense of stability. And in 1 week workshop, we call them a cure. And there's 3 treatments in a cure. In 1 week workshop, his ataxia gone. Whoa. That's never even been documented. I went and scrubbed the research as best I could. I've never seen one treatment with Iboga. And we're working with Iboga, not Ibogaine in this setting. Never seen that degree of severe chronic neurologic impairment gone, 1 treatment. So that's only an N of 1. It's a sample size of 1. Maybe there were other confounding variables. Who knows? I doubt it. I think it was pretty much the wood. And it's an example for me, like we're just scratching the surface of the potential benefit here. And in 1 treatment, Nolan Williams' study last year at Stanford showed that the brain got younger. 1 treatment, 1.37 years younger. So what does it look like if you're in steady treatment or if you're microdosing the wood, which means you're taking a small amount, there's not an appreciable altered state experience, and you're doing it a longer period over time. Kind of like if psychiatric medications were done that way, that would be better. If people were microdosing psychiatric medications, it would be significantly better for the field because you tend to habituate. So if you're taking Zoloft 100 milligrams every day, you eventually habituate. And then to get the same effect, you need 150 milligrams or 200 or 300. And then you get side effects. So this is just like one change. If you just did 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, take off on the weekends, that would be significantly better to help people not get habituated, need higher doses, and then have side effects. So anyway, all that to say is we're just starting to scratch the surface of our potential here. And that's the thing that's most exciting. I don't think we're going to see this full movement come to its zenith point in my lifetime or in our lifetime. This is going to be a multi-generational exploration. So that probably legalization. I'll just touch on that. So legalization, it's still a Schedule 1 travesty. Most of the psychedelics that I mentioned, Schedule 1 travesty. Absolutely no reason, logically, ethically, to have these medicines as Schedule 1. Schedule 1 means there's no known medical benefit and they're highly addictive. Well, we just talked about Iboga being like negating both of those, right? It's anti-addictive. Iboga is not a pleasant experience. You're not going to go have a good high. And so people are not typically going to go do this recreationally. So it doesn't deserve to be in Schedule 1. No, by the way, in this kind of like gray zone where there's so much known appreciation for these medicines and people don't have access, you have a lot of people still dying at crazy rates. The suicide rate for veterans is like 20 to 40 a day. And those are just the ones that we know of. So legalization is not here yet. It's coming soon. And one of our movements with Thank You Life is working internationally with centers that do good ethical work abroad. So that could be Central America, South America. A lot of centers I know are down there, centers I've run or advised to. So yes, we're doing our best. All right. So with that, Ronnie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so we have a breakout room, little, let's say 8 or 9 minutes. Here is I'll just share the question. Okay, Dr. Dan, I think we're mostly all here.
Amazing.
And I think it would be best if you agree, we can jump into just Q&A, see what the people are wanting to know.
Yeah, that's perfect.
So if you do have a question, however feels best, if you want to actually do the raise hand function or just literally raise your hand on screen, I'll see you and I'll just, add you so that you can have a little conversation with Dr. Dan. It looks like Scott has a question. Amazing. Scott, can you just,
I unmuted. Yeah. I'm curious, for people who are in a lot of like physical pain, and I'm talking about my wife, who we just moved to an assisted living place up in Oregon. She's got 1 through 5 fuse, and she thinks she needs to get 6 and 7 fuse. She's in a lot of physical pain. I'm just kind of curious. I would think this still has application, but I'm just curious maybe what that looks like or some more insight about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because Iboga hasn't been studied extensively for chronic pain, but there is really good anecdotal experience that people have had with chronic pain syndromes getting significant relief because it works on the opioid receptors, the mu and the kappa opioid receptors. And we don't still exactly know how it does what it does, but that's more on the microdosing side. So if like somebody went through a significant experience and there's still, a structural issue, they may have temporary benefit, but the benefit is going to be longer standing if there's a continuation of that dose. So that's where we come into the macro experience and the micro dosing experience. And then also if we're looking at the pantheon of medicines, in that hierarchy that I shared earlier, ketamine does have its place as well. It's a very different molecule, but it has been good for chronic pain syndromes. It's legal, it's available. You can use it topically. So it has a little bit more of a direct transdermal location effect, and it doesn't have to, depress the central nervous system because it is that dissociative medicine. And there's other things to kind of unpack in regards to chronic pain syndrome treatments, but those are the ones from the psychedelic orientation that would be like my top 2.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Christine.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Oh, you're muted, I think. There you are.
There I am. Sorry.
Yeah.
I missed the beginning of the conversation, so I'm sorry if I'm asking something that you explained. But I'm curious about how, basically how it works, like how long. I think you said something about how long the experience is,
Yeah.
and then what the what the come down period is like? And
sure. Yeah, happy to. We didn't actually talk so much about that. So your question's right on track.
okay, good.
There's a bit of a difference between Iboga and Ibogaine, right? Ibogaine's the primary alkaloid, doesn't have all the other alkaloids, Ibogaine is about half as long acting as the whole medicine, Iboga or the wood, and that's about 12 to 18 hours. Iboga, the whole medicine, is about 24 to 36 hours. Now that's the whole process. That's not the whole time you're high, so to speak, or you're like deep in it, because it has a real long tail. So with the wood, depending on absorption rates and how it's given, whether it's a tea or a powder, and how fine that powder is, it can take about an hour to come on. And you're in it for a good 12 to 16 hours, pretty strong. And then it's got another 12 to 16 hours that you're tailing off, and you're kind of in the in-between time. Yeah, and Ibogaine is about half of that.
Okay. And so, I mean, that's kind of a long period. So
it's kind of a long period.
What are you doing during that time?
You're usually pretty flat, pretty quiet. So from the observer's perspective, it might not look like much is going on, but inside there's a lot happening.
So you're lying down, shades on kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's in a group or it's not in a group?
Usually it's done in a group. And in the Bwiti, where the Iboga comes from, it's very different. There's no lying down. If you get tired, or you're just like, kind of like overwhelmed by the experience, because it can be tiring, especially if you're working through multiple days of work. If you look tired, they just get you up, sing you up, dance you up, and because they're playing music the whole time. And it's just a strong medicine. It's a strengthening medicine. The more you work with it, the more strengthening it is. Usually in the first times working with it, it's kind of like it just puts you down, so to speak. So it's really working on you. It's working on your body. Sometimes people get well. It can stimulate purge, kind of like ayahuasca that way. But it's very much a mind medicine. It's just going in and clearing and cleaning. For me, it's like using another computer analogy. Like if we're working on our computer all the time and our computer is not updating or cleaning itself, you pick up all these cookies, especially if you're doing a lot of internet surfing. And these cookies are like splinters in your computer's hard drive, and you have to go in and you have to clean it out. And that's what the wood is doing. That's what Iboga and Ibogaine are doing. They're going out and they're cleaning your internal hard drive. And so sometimes you can see what that is, and it can be a life review. Some people have the kind of classic experience of going through all the salient aspects of life, primary relationships, core memories, significant like influential experiences that shaped a person's life. There can be that life review. So there's kind of the cardinal aspects of it, but then there's all this stuff that's just getting removed so quickly. It can be like, for me, the first time I worked with the wood, it was like looking at, I think it was like the second Matrix, when he goes and meets the architect and there's like 100 computer screens and they're all flickering different scenes. That's what it was like for me. It was just going through all this data and just cleaning. And then I came out the other side and I'd never had the experience of my mind just being like glass. Like it was just like the squeegee on the inside of my forehead. And on the other side, like once the storm went by, the waters were just calm. It was like glass. And that stayed for months and months and months, that level of clarity.
Wow. And is there much of a come down afterwards? Like, how do you feel?
No, not much of a come down. It's, well, I mean, I guess that's variable depending on, how you're relating a come down to. It's not like a come down of like MDMA, which is like really high and then you drop. And then sometimes with MDMA, the come down on the next few days is deep. People like drop their neurochemical reserves because MDMA artificially floods your system with all those neurotransmitters. The wood works differently than that. So it's more like you're kind of like, well, you could be up with the energy of it, but it feels more like it's a downward experience because you're just really flat. It's just working your system. It's kind of like you're getting, squeegeed by God. And then you come up out of that experience into a new baseline. That's what most people would describe. Yeah. Not a pleasant experience, but the benefits on the other side are remarkable.
What do you find not pleasant about it?
It can, for people who haven't had an altered state experience before, it can be like jarring.
Not a good first time experience, probably.
For many, it can be overwhelming. And if they're able to stay, and most people are able to stay through it because we kind of coach them knowing that it's going to be overwhelming going in so they don't have false expectations. And we just keep coming back to that, keep coming back to the breath, trust the process. And it's a long road. It's whereas like ketamine's an hour, right? Psilocybin's like 4 to 5. This was like 12 to 18 and you're in it. But it's incredible on the other side. And the more you work, if people go through multiple experiences, the more it eases off because the medicine isn't cleaning out so much. It's like you've already done that initial flush and now you don't have as much to do if you came back to the altar.
Right. Do you think it's something that, I personally feel like with psychedelics, you kind of need to, repeat them somewhat to stay in like the connected state.
I think of it personally like going to the gym. I just stay in regular practice. I may not be in altered state experiences every day, so that might not be totally like the gym. But for me, I'm continuously curious to know what I haven't seen about myself. And for me, I'm also in this field. I speak, talk, lecture, etc. So it's helpful for me to have multiple experiences to be able to see how these medicines work well for a particular person at a particular time, given everything they're in the midst of. So that's part of the alchemy and the art of this work. Because Iboga and Ibogaine isn't for everybody. Psychedelic therapy is not for everybody. I think it's an excellent tool. And if a person doesn't know about it, then I would suggest them explore it unless there's a clear contraindication or reason not to. But I think it should be a personal experience and for people to trust their intuition when the right time to come back in is. And that's kind of variable for everybody. But, at minimum, it might be like, your annual kind of check-in with your own soul nature on your birthday, at least an annual checkup with the internal doctor to see how life's going.
I'm sure there's a lot of people you think, like we were talking about Parkinson's or dementia. Are there significant, like a number of, or a short number of things you think it would be the most helpful for in terms of trauma? Yeah.
Addiction.
Yeah.
100%. And then beyond that, whether it's depression, PTSD, anxiety, TBI, there are other medicines that are also beneficial. Ayahuasca is good for all those things that I also just mentioned. Clearly, from the addiction perspective, Iboga is the best. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah, let's keep it moving. We have a couple other questions. Thanks. That was a great conversation to tune into. Next, we have Megan coming up. All right, 1 second. There you go.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there, Megan.
Thanks for your comments. My question hopefully is a good segue. I'm coming at this from more of a philosophical question of how, oftentimes when society finds value, there's a gold rush to extract it. And so I'm thinking about, an increased demand for Ibogaine as it becomes a headline. I'm thinking about people who have one experience and maybe it's helpful, maybe they want more. I'm thinking about it becoming distanced from its cultural roots. And so I'm just kind of curious if you could speak to, as it becomes more of a cultural topic, how we can approach some of that just culture.
Yeah, super important. This is why I think it's beneficial for Ibogaine to go into semi-synthetic and synthetic production, because now we can ensure supply chain and we're not harvesting and extracting from the communities of origin with negative impact. And we see, to your point, we see that happens on food production lines. Like quinoa in the Andes is more expensive, so expensive now that the locals can't even afford it, or whatever, like superfood or super thing or super like gold rush. So I get less concerned about the supply chains and the negative impact that way. I still think we should have reciprocity back to the cultures and the communities of origin, for sure. Medicines work better when we have a reciprocal engagement. And ideally, that's what we're doing kind of in the orientation of Thank You Life, because when our cup is full with that gratitude, naturally we want to share it and we want to give back. So we have not yet, we haven't even yet made cultural amends to the First Nations people here in the United States. So we have a long way to go to kind of like bring all of our relationships current and hold and healed. And we also don't want to be doing more trauma while we're still trying to heal the backlog of trauma. And the last thing I'll say in regards to the cultural kind of impact is that the Bwiti, my understanding of and there's a lot of different origin stories to Iboga. The Pygmies were the first one that worked with Iboga and the little people in the forest, deep in the forest. And they were only told to come out by the medicine and by their relationship with Creator to bring the medicine to the people because they knew the people were sick. Kind of like the Quiero in the Andes, when they went up to 14,000 feet, when the Spanish came in the 1400s and 1500s, and the Spanish were just like blitzkrieg all the indigenous peoples, the Quiero went above 14,000 feet so that the Spanish wouldn't come. And they were there for 500 years. No one even knew that. And then they were told to come back and give their wisdom teachings to the people because the people were sick. So thankfully, so many of our brothers and sisters that have been holding these rituals and ceremonies, Iboga, there's we really don't know how far back the line goes because it's oral tradition, kind of like ayahuasca that way. The suspicion is that it's thousands of years old and it's been held by these cultural kind of oral traditions passing on the medicines. And thankfully, our brothers and sisters that have been doing this work for centuries had the courage to come out and the compassion to come out and try and support the healing of the people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking the question. Okay, Josh Baker.
Unmute. I'm muted.
No, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So I'm getting ready to go on June 6th. I'm going to Mexico to do an Ibogaine treatment. And it's pretty awesome that I came across Dave Davies and John Kaplan because I've already kind of was going in the path and they asked me to get on here. So thank you to you both for getting me connected. My question, I got a two-part question, and then I guess I'll just go with a two-part question. What should I be doing to set myself up best for the experience? Because I'm getting ready to go. Is there something I should be doing to set myself up for something that's less than 2 weeks late?
Totally. And the second part of that question?
Aftercare.
Okay. Aftercare, preparation and aftercare.
Yes.
So I want to recognize that we're at time at least as we had allocated. It's 5:15. I'm happy to stay on for as long as we want. But Josh, after I answer your question, I'll turn it back over to Ronnie and we'll kind of make a plan from there. Does that sound good to everybody? Yeah. Okay. So preparation and integration. Yes and yes. Both highly important. Ibogaine and Iboga don't really have like the preparation or the dieta like some of the other medicines like ayahuasca might. Because there's oftentimes an orientation to particular diet or particular personal practice, things to do, things to stay away from. Iboga is such a strong experience, and it's so effective at going in and cleaning everything that you can have a really shitty diet and you can be on a host of street drugs, still come into an experience and be pretty net positive because it just kind of like moves all that other stuff out of the way. Still, I think it's supremely helpful to go in rested because it's going to be a strong experience. Have a journaling practice if you don't already have one. Have kind of a self-reflection practice if you don't already have one. That can be journaling or it could be meditation or it could be contemplation. time in nature, something where you're having the cultivated experience of getting to know your own inner state, and then being able to find and cultivate your experience of centeredness within that inner state. That's going to help you during the experience, and it's going to help you when you come out of the experience. The cleaner you go in, the easier the experience is going to be. And that's the same for all medicines, because the medicines have less that they're trying to kind of like help clean out. So you're already coming ahead of the curve, so to speak. And that's probably it for now. I mean, there's probably other things there's a lot more that could be said about preparation. I think it's helpful to recognize, maybe I'll say this and then we'll switch to integration, that the medicines aren't about fixing anything. They're about helping to show you more of your own self.
Cool.
That's why they're called clarigen. So it'll oftentimes clarify the practices, the things for you to do moving forward. And with Ibogaine and Iboga, oftentimes it has very clear marching orders. So if you're willing to get the script, then my invitation would be commit to engaging that script, whatever that prescription is, and whatever it says. If you know it to be true, then it's up to you to do your 50% on the backside. And good integration starts with preparation, and good preparation starts with integration. So in the preparation conversation, you have to be talking about your landing pad, how you're going to integrate, how you're going to be able to take all of this home and make it usable. Ideally, you've got some time on the backside that's spacious. You're not just going to hit the ground running and stack a whole bunch of board meetings and a whole lot of to-dos the week or 2 weeks after. I encourage people, if they can, be on halftime or quarter time for the next 2 weeks on the other side, just so you have a lot of space to integrate, let yourself land, do a lot of reflection, and then have, if you're the kind of person that does well with accountability, then have somebody that can help you stay accountable to what you know you need to do. Yeah, and that's kind of variable for everybody. Ideally, it's really good to have community. You just mentioned John, and you already have some people in your community, even if it's not immediate, but at least virtual, that know this work and want to support you through this work. It's really hard if people don't have community to be able to integrate back into. Yeah, and those are probably the high points, I think, at this stage of the game.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Josh. Yeah, bless your experience. Yeah,
Thanks.
wish you super well through it.
I think that's a good place to wrap. Could bring Laura back up here.
Well, yeah, thanks, Ronnie. Thanks for your help, by the way. That's Ronnie, who's I never remember, Director of Marketing and Everything Beautiful and Important for Thank You Life. Thank you for your help. And yeah, just to say, Dan, before I close us together, if there's any final words you'd like to say. We have this beautiful group here that are just going to put on gallery view. Yeah, we have some of our board members, some supporters. Thank you for all the support you're lending. Some of our staff are here, and yeah, new friends. So yeah, if there's anything you'd like to say just in general about this moment in history around psychedelic healing before I take the baton and close us together.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was trying to figure out a way how, because I'm such a Luddite, I don't even know how to put on gallery view on my side. I knew at one point.
Up in the corner that says view, and you can scroll down to the speaker, gallery.
Amazing. There everybody is. Okay, fabulous. Yeah, this time in human history. Well, it's a powerful time. I mean, clearly we're going through a metamorphosis. What some of my teachers would talk about, the merging of the timelines. And it's phenomenal. When I was given a lecture to some friends not too long ago, I was hearing from different communities and different storytellers about this prophetic time in human history. So I was only getting kind of introduced to Chat GPT at the time. So I took it to Chat and I said, okay, give me, to the best of your ability, all the independent indigenous prophecies about this being a transformational time in human history. And it came out with like 18. I mean, it was some like very significant number of different independent communities speaking about prophetically from a long time ago about this little window. And it wasn't like, oh, the 21st century. It was, I asked it between 2025 and 2027. It was a very narrow window, relatively speaking, in human history. So here's the 3-year window. Who says that this time's, somewhat significant? And it was like 18 different storylines around this transformational window that we're in. So I was like, oh, okay, there's something to this. And that was about 6 months ago. And the more I keep that in the frame and kind of like the forefront of my mind, the more it gives me a lot of humility, but also inspiration to do what's mine to do in this, relatively transformational window that we're all in the midst of. And we're, I think, going to see most of those timelines and stories would talk about this emergence, this emergence and remembrance, this remembrance of how to live in a good way with our family of humanity, this emergence of a new way of being in a very complex world, and a revolution in most of the major institutions that we're currently living through. So there's a revolution happening in medicine work and in medicine in general. There's a revolution happening in politics, in the ecosystem, in our relationship with food and agriculture, in education, in, the list is long of all the different transformational cycles and institutions that are going through significant change right now. So for me, it doesn't seem coincidental that we have, in my humble opinion, the most powerful tools for consciousness available in mass, at scale, in a way that's never happened before. And so when I think of my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they didn't have these kind of tools available to them. And if they had these tools available to them, I don't think they would have been interested in using them. I mean, maybe. I still have conversations with my dad thinking he's going to come around. He's like, yeah, no, I'm pretty good at this stage of the game. I'm like, really? Here's all the data. He's such a data head. Here's all the data. Aren't you curious? He's like, no. I mean, maybe a little bit. I'm not ready to lose control. I'm like, well, that's an honest answer, right? So that's for me, the curiosity right now is like, you're all being invited to be ambassadors of this work. You're going to be having conversations with people about this work. And for me, what I recognized a long time ago is not up to me to sell it. It's up to me to share information and to share stories if people are curious. And if they're not curious, amazing. And if they're curious, amazing. Here you can go, get a bunch of information. And if you want to have a conversation, I'm available for that. So I think it's just important to hold it in kind of this like inspired opportunity that we have at this dynamic time in human history. And I think the medicines are just coming up at the right time to help us orient to a more harmonious way of living. Because I think ultimately at the end of the day, all this is about creating harmony and fellowship. Because if you look out in the natural world, that's all nature's trying to do, harmony and fellowship. And those are kind of like the governing forces that have supported evolution over billions of years. So if we can kind of orient to just the fundamental laws and rules of engagement with life, I think we're going to be better off. And I haven't found, for me, a better tool that's able to help people do that as efficiently and effectively. And I'm not necessarily about shortcuts, but I'm also thinking like, oh, life's pretty short. It goes by really fast. And this is a pretty dynamic time. So let's get to work. My lady Sonia says this is an all hands on deck moment in human history. And I kind of tend to agree. So thank you for staying long, 13 minutes at this stage of the game. Thank you for taking out your own valuable time to be a part of the conversation. I think time and presence is our most valuable asset these days. And I appreciate you sharing that with all of us today.
Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, fellowship and harmony. Thank you for all of your presence here and for all of the ways all of you support our mission. May it continue. We have Meredith Thomas here, and make a wave, our wonderful director of philanthropy and my, I don't know, partner in crime. So wonderful to work with you. And then we have a few other staff members here. Thank you for being here, Ryder. And I think Denise, is she still here? Kevin's left. There's Denise. Yeah, and just to say that we're in a very exciting time at Thank You Life, and one of the things that Dan made reference to is to say that, you know, we've really been supporting people to get ketamine treatments because that's the one that's available and legal. And we're working in this next phase to help people get access to other medicines through legal means, by going to Oregon for psilocybin or going to Costa Rica for ayahuasca, or, you know, and we're just at the beginning of trying to make sure people have access to some of the other modalities as well. Just letting you know, stay tuned, pay attention. And yeah, thank you so much for all of your part in that. And thank you, Dan, for your time. I know you're very busy and doing all kinds of wonderful things all over the world, and we really appreciate you taking this time. And yeah, I think that's it for now. It's 5:30 on the button, so many thanks, gratitude to all, thank you all, and thank you to life. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody.